There is no choice but to move forwards and upwards. Those were the words of the AU Commission Chairperson Dlamini Zuma at the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. We've been live in the Ethiopian capital looking at the strategies and the challenges facing the African Union moving forward. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm Ramanyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. In the next half hour, we'll make a speed run through the key business news stories you need to know about from across Africa. Here's what's coming up. South African Airways, it's still in turbulence, but will this turnaround strategy work this time round? We'll also be introducing you to entrepreneurs who want to change cross-border money transfers and cut charges by more than half across Africa. Let's start in the Ethiopian capital tonight. Zimbabwe's President Robert Gabriel Mugabe. He's the new chairman of the African Union. He replaces Mauritanian's head of state, Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz. Now, the 90-year-old former Liberation War hero is Africa's third longest serving leader, and many on the continent regard him with some semblance of deep respect. That said, he is subject to travel bans from both the United States and the European Union in protest of alleged political violence and intimidation in Zimbabwe. He vowed to lead the continent towards accelerated infrastructure development and increased investment in agriculture during his time in office.
By electing me to preside over this august body, with the full knowledge of the onerous responsibility that lies ahead, I humbly accept your collective decision. Since the majority of our people depend on the land for sustenance and livelihood, we need to ensure they have access to the land and that Africa's vast agricultural potential is fully harnessed. The land reform program that my government embarked upon since the year 2000 was precisely meant to achieve this. If, in the first place, not to displace colonizers and ensure that our people, Zimbabweans, assumed the ownership of that land. That land was precisely meant to achieve this, notwithstanding the practical demonization that my country has endured from those who had selfish and vested interests in our land.
Over in North Africa, Egypt is planning to reduce fuel subsidies by $2.64 billion in the next fiscal year. The government cut the subsidies last summer, sometime around June, July, raising the prices of gasoline, diesel, natural gas by as much as 78%. Economists lauded that move, but they were criticized by some ordinary Egyptians who are accustomed to having fairly cheap energy. Yasser Kim has more from the Egyptian capital of Cairo.
Subsidies are a major headache to the government as it tries to fight off a huge budget deficit. Subsidies on fuel accounts to nearly 6% of GDP and 20% of total expenditure. The government eased off some of the pressure last year by reducing oil expenses by around $6 billion from a total $16 billion. With oil prices hitting a low, some analysts expect the government to reduce subsidies even further.
The government could make use of the situation by reducing subsidies, and the money will be used to buy gas to generate electricity and ease the budget deficit.
Egyptians, however, reject any more increase in prices.
The
price of transportation will increase. Food and drinks will increase too. All this will affect only the poor people like us.
The government has quickly denied any plans for more cuts. A statement by the Petroleum Ministry said the plan is to reduce subsidies gradually over 5 years. Nothing anytime soon. In its latest report, the World Bank forecast a 4% growth and positive outlook for 2015. Economic reforms look well on track, so the government cannot risk upsetting the public opinion with any more price hikes in the near future. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
South African Airways plans to cut costs quite a bit. It will be cancelling flights to China, for example, and it will be looking to cut off other routes as well and to cut staff as its international route wiped out profits for last year. According to its acting CEO, SAA is technically bankrupt. It's surviving off state-guaranteed loans. Sumitra Naidu filed this report on a turnaround strategy that's being implemented to get this national carrier back into healthier positions.
An operating loss of $3.7 million. It's a slight improvement, though, from last year's heavy loss. SAA said it was hard hit by the weaker rand and maintenance costs for aging aircraft.
The maintenance cost is largely driven by contracts. It's contractually driven, maintenance reserves and return conditions. The increase in this line item basically due to currency weakness, 175 million, and currency losses on our liability provision.
And despite the massive drop in oil prices being good news for many, SAA said it hedged most of its fuel requirements and is yet to see any benefit. The airline did well on the continent with a 17% rise in revenue on African routes. But some of its long-haul international flights recorded a $160 million loss for the company. SAA has confirmed that it will be cancelling several routes as part of its turnaround strategy. The Johannesburg-Beijing route will be stopped in the first week of April this year.
The average airline globally spend 20% of total operating expenditure on fuel. In the case of SA, we expend 36% of total expenditure on fuel. The reason is fairly evident and obvious. One, South Africa is geographically more removed from the rest of the world than the average country. So we use more fuel just because we have to fly further. Secondly, our average aircraft type is older than some of our main competitors.
SAA was moved to the National Treasury in December last year as part of government strategy to turn around the cash-strapped airline. To date, SAA has received $143 million in guarantees from government in order to keep flying.
Funding allocations will not be automatic, but will depend on entities demonstrating sound business plans and greater efficiencies. The funding framework will distinguish purely the commercial activities from the costs of exercising developmental mandates. In order to discharge your developmental mandate, you must also be financially sustainable. It will include closer monitoring to ensure efficient delivery on government priorities, while simultaneously promoting improved commercial performance.
SAA has tried several turnaround strategies in recent years, but none have worked. Many are hopeful the latest plan to improve the health of the state carrier will be successful. Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
Kenya's second largest retail chain, Uchumi, plans to open a dozen new branches across East Africa this year. The retailer currently operates 37 stores in Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Late last year, it raised $9.77 million in a rights issue to boost its working capital and to fund its expansion plans. Consumer demand is a key driver of Africa's economic and investment growth, and some analysts argue that middle-class consumers with their rising disposable income levels have fueled this growth. Uchumi's chief executive, Jonathan Shiano, said the retailer will be opening 5 new branches in Kenya, 1 in Uganda and 6 in Tanzania by December. Right then, a quick run through the equity markets here for you. One of those rare days when you've got a fairly mixed bag across the board. The all-share index in Nigeria ending the day lower by about a quarter. However, positive numbers coming through in South Africa with the all-share index up by 0.6 and the 20-share index in Nairobi also up by about a third. The EGX 30, of course, being closed today. Coming up next, farmers in Madagascar facing a bleak future as the funds to fight these little critters have run out. Black empowerment in Zimbabwe has gone up a notch with new rules to encourage black-owned companies to list on the stock exchange. We'll be looking at those in detail tomorrow. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening. Global business weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Sustainable development and a commitment to developing partnerships with Africa. Some of the key phrases already used at the Africa Global Business Forum here in Dubai.
There is a need for a predictable environment in which investors have to put their money.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business Africa. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has called for urgent funds to address the ongoing threat posed to food security and nutrition in Madagascar. Up to 13 million people could face hunger as they battle against an ongoing plague of locusts loses steam due to a lack of funds. Penina Karibe has more.
9 million people earn a living from agriculture in Madagascar. It is feared that infestations, if untreated, could wipe out food crops and livestock grazing lands. In September 2013, Madagascar's Ministry of Agriculture and the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization launched a 3-year program aimed at bringing back the locust situation to a recession. Some 30 million hectares of land have been surveyed, with 1.3 hectares treated with pesticides to date. The locust plague that started spreading across Madagascar in 2012 was successfully halted last year, but the risks of relapse are high during the rainy season, which provides ideal breeding conditions for the pests.
It means the production goes down, their source of income goes down, and therefore the access to food is an issue, and their nutrition is ultimately affected. So it means it has really not only immediate impact on their life and livelihood, but also potentially even longer term.
Another consequence of further infestations could see households migrate to cities, even though economic opportunities are scarce. An estimated 91% of the population lives below the poverty line across the country.
About 2 years ago, 18 months ago, we drew the international community attention on the critical locust situation Madagascar was facing. We informed the world that a plague was potentially going to devastate the agriculture of Madagascar and was going to severely affect the life and livelihood of about 13 million people.
According to FAO, some $10.6 million is needed to complete the locust program, including monitoring and spraying operations going through the end of the rainy season in May 2015.
With the funding we have, we will be short. We will have to stop our control operation as of February this year, which means right in the midst of the second year. So for that not to happen, we need the support. We need urgently $10 million to be contributed by the international community to carry out survey operations, to treat locust infestation, and also to do all the related work in terms of capacity building, in terms of monitoring the impact on the environment, and so on and so forth.
According to FAO, as much as 40% of crops in southern Madagascar are at risk from the locust crisis in combination with the droughts and cyclones to which the island nation is prone to. More than 3/4 of the population in the Atsimo, Andrefana and Androy regions, where maize and cassava production have declined sharply and rice output remains well below trend, currently face food insecurity, up notably from a year earlier. Penina Karibe, CCTV.
Now let's go back to the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa. The African Union Summit, of course, is one of the key events that will be taking place this week. The Ebola crisis and the response to it is one of the key stories that we are keeping a very, very close eye on. The current trend in that particular story is whether or not Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone should all get debt relief, what form it should take and how it should be achieved. Let's explore that in a lot more detail with Carlos Lopez now. He's the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He joins me live from the Ethiopian capital. Mr. Lopez, thank you for your time. Let's start with the IMF. They're proposing using the Post-Catastrophe Debt Relief Trust to provide debt relief of some sort for these three countries. Could you explain to us what this is and how it works?
Well, in principle, we can talk about debt relief, but we prefer debt cancellation because debt relief is a way of basically saying that you are going to take care of the deficits, and everybody agrees that the deficit is around $300 million in public finance in the three countries, and this has more or less been pledged. But what we are calling is for debt cancellation, which is about $3 billion for the three countries. And the reason is because you need a clean slate after all the efforts that these countries have put into fighting Ebola. Everybody knows that the school stopped, all the public service money has been diverted to Ebola. The epidemiological dimensions of Ebola have taken complete control of public finance. So it will be really difficult to justify that these countries, instead of doing what everybody expects, which is to put money for health care to rebuild their public health care systems, are going to service debt. So this is the reason why the call has been quite strident, and I'm very happy that the summit this afternoon adopted a resolution asking for debt cancellation.
Indeed. As far as you know, do these current talks around debt relief, debt cancellation, especially with this PCDRT, are they focusing on the entire debt load of all three countries, or just the debt that these countries have acquired from the IMF in the past?
No, it's basically the entire debt owed to international debtors. In fact, we are not talking about the domestic debt, we are talking about the international one. And I think the structure of that debt is mostly from international financial institutions, basically multilateral institutions like the IMF, and very little from bilaterals. So it is very important that we convince the multilateral institutions to move along. I know that some of them have already started studying the issue. They are talking still about debt relief, but that's why it's so important to make the case for the clean slate and for a complete clear of the deck so these countries can start afresh.
Tell me, Mr. Lopez, how exactly easy is it for us to actually just write off $3 billion worth of debt given by multilateral institutions to all these three countries? What will it take to clear that off their books?
Well, it will require that the boards of these different institutions consider it. And in order for them to consider it, the technical analysis has to be made. After all, debt cancellation is quite a dramatic measure, and it may entail that people don't believe in the credit worthiness of the countries. So we don't want that to happen. We want actually to attract investment. These countries were experiencing very high growth rates, and they were having a very good macroeconomic performance. So we don't want to destroy that image, but we want to make the case that in this particular situation it is justified because of the scale of the response that had to be put together by these countries. And we are giving examples like when Fukushima disaster occurred, the prefecture of Fukushima, which in terms of size would be the equivalent of the economies of one of these countries, has been forgiven its debt because the reasons were as compelling as they are for Ebola. So the boards of these institutions, once the technical case is made, I'm sure will be persuaded, and we are very much counting on it.
Indeed. Thank you for your time this evening. Carlos Lopez, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, live from Addis Ababa. He has been very insistent on that particular topic of complete debt cancellation, not just relief or restructuring. But the debate, of course, does go on. Let's take you to Zimbabwe now, a completely different country on the other end of the entire economic of the continent, as it were. Zimbabwe's bourse plans to set up a secondary stock exchange, and it's targeting black-owned businesses for listing. Now, that exchange will have less stringent listing requirements and a minimum share capital threshold of $250,000. As Farai Mokotoa reports on What's Hot Tonight, this alternative market is part of a broader strategy to support the country's empowerment laws.
An alternative exchange to cater for a growing small to medium business sector has been on the cards for years now, but could soon be a reality after the stock exchange issued listing guidelines. The leading voice for black empowerment, the Affirmative Action Group, says a dedicated exchange could help formalize the fragmented SME sector.
They become more credible, they become much easier to identify, much easier to organize, and perhaps also the oversight in terms of governance issues and so on, that becomes a lot easier. And the resource mobilization becomes a lot easier as well.
But the group cites the prevailing economic environment that has left many companies in survival mode as a potential stumbling block. The fear is that there may not be enough takers.
When you have big companies experiencing very, very severe cash flow problems, budgetary constraints, and perhaps market constraints, and so on, and funding constraints generally, then how is it possible that the small to medium scale businesses, which I think by implication that's what they are talking about, are able to do that?
Already, trading on the main bourse is depressed, and there have been at least 15 counters delisted since 2012. However, the Zimbabwe Emerging Enterprise Market, as this new exchange will be known, might actually attract existing counters listed on the main ZSE who could opt to downgrade in favor of the lower capital thresholds. And with the majority of trading on the ZSE dominated by foreign investors, it could also open up a new source of capital for SMEs who have been largely frustrated by local commercial banks. Parai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
It's been a day of gains for commodity prices in some respects. Oil pushing some gains, up about a quarter, 49.26 on Brent crude last time we checked. Coffee, of course, also pushing higher, up 1.15%. Cocoa, however, relatively flat so far. 26.85 per metric ton is a relevant number. Coming up next, we'll introduce you to two South Africans who are cutting the cost of money transfers across borders by more than half from the palm of your hand. Welcome back to the program. A new money transfer service has opened up for business in South Africa. It seeks to tap into growing remittance flows within Africa. Mama Money is a Cape Town-based startup that aims to help immigrants in the country send cash back home, as Travis Andrews now reports.
With mobile money becoming one of the fastest growing payment solutions on the African continent, more and more people are beginning to embrace the ease it provides to transact. African diaspora too have in large parts made ample use of mobile money services, especially when sending remittances back home, which amounts to billions every year. Now a new cashless money transfer service called Mama Money aims to tap into that growing market by slashing their commission rates to a flat fee of just 5%, and in turn saving people more money than they are currently paying.
We saw a huge opportunity. We saw that the high volumes of remittances, it's a huge number coming into Africa. Everyone has a family member somewhere that's sending their money, and that's a lifeline. We then looked at South Africa being the most expensive country in the world to send money out of. At the moment, the average fee to send money out of South Africa is about 19%, where the global average is 8.9%. So there was a huge opportunity, a big gap.
Mama Money is the brainchild of social entrepreneurs Matthew Coquelin and Raphael Grosnowski, who've begun their first South Africa to Zimbabwe remittances corridor after noticing the difficulties its citizens face in sending money back home. The service has also partnered with technology payment solution firm Electro Payments, who've laid down the technology platform with which the mobile transfers to and from Zimbabwe can be done instantaneously.
What we do is we have records of the transactions in our database, and we connect to various cloud services integrated into the South African banking environment as well as into the Zimbabwean banking environment. By creating that link between Zimbabwean banking infrastructure and South African banking infrastructure, we're able to make money transfer as easy as doing an internet banking payment, or perhaps as easy as sending an SMS even.
Landwell Kanyarere is one of over 1.9 million Zimbabwean immigrants that live in South Africa. His family back home is one of many who stand to benefit when he pays lower charges on remittances.
I've been sending money to Zimbabwe with this money transfer services that I was paying more than 10% fee, but with this new money transfer service that I'm paying 5%, it's less fee that I'm paying right now, and my family is able to receive more money back in Zimbabwe.
For now, cross-border remittances remain a pivotal lifeline of many migrants' families, and the role that mobile money transfers are playing in simplifying their lives is increasingly coming to the fore. Mama Money plans to roll out its service in Malawi next, followed by a slow African-wide rollout. Only time will tell, though, whether it's able to shake up the industry and make remittance rates far more affordable. Representative CCTV, Cape Town.
Right, and let's make a quick run through currencies here for you. Some macro data coming out in Kenya earlier today. Inflation in January down to 5.53%. Most of that decline attributable, of course, to the fall in energy prices, specifically oil. Over in Nigeria, the Naira, 187.95. Some investors, however, betting that after the elections, the central bank might then have the room and, of course, a mandate to then cut things down and institute another devaluation of the currency, as it were. Because at the moment, of course, it's been hitting record low after record low. Earlier this week, we saw about 191 to the Naira on the American dollar. Right then, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. We'd like to hear what you think about the program. globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com is the email to use. And of course, we also enjoy hearing your feedback on Facebook and on Twitter. The handle to look out for there is at CCTV News Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Ramanyani.